The smell of blood still lingered in the air. It was the scent of something left behind. Then he saw them. 5 bodies hanging upside down from a rough wooden frame, hastily built in the middle of the grassland. Thick ropes dug into their ankles. Long black hair fell all the way to the ground. The bodies were Apache tall, muscular, battered by whips and rifle butts. Their clothes were torn, scorched, and covered in dust and dried blood. One of them was still conscious. The woman hanging in the middle opened her eyes and stared directly at Jonah. No begging, no tears, just a gaze so fierce it made him tighten his grip on the rifle. She was taller than the others with broad shoulders and a chest that rose and fell in shallow, painful breaths as she tried to stay upright through the agony. Jonah understood instantly. Slave traders, they had not killed them, at least not yet. Maybe they hung them up as punishment, or as a warning, a mark planning to come back for their goods once the sun came up. A part of Jonah told him to turn away. This was no longer his war. He had left the army behind, buried too many bodies because of foolish orders, but the woman's eyes never left him. And in that moment, Jonah Hale knew if he walked away, he would never be a man again. Jonah drew his knife and the first rope fell. Jonah Hale's cabin had never been this crowded. 5 large bodies were scattered across the narrow wooden room, taking up nearly all the space. Jonah had to move the table and push the chairs against the wall just to make room for them to lie down. They did not groan. Jonah boiled water and tore up old shirts for bandages. He worked in silence, out of habit, an old rhythm from his days on the front lines. As he leaned down to cut the rope, marks still etched deep around the ankles of the woman who had been hanging in the middle. She opened her eyes. "Do not," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I am not planning to tie you up again," Jonah replied without looking up. She watched him for a long time before finally speaking. "My name is Tala," Jonah gave a small nod. "Jonah." Later, when the fire had settled, Tala leaned back against the wall, her broad arms wrapped around her bruised ribs. The others slowly regained consciousness. Their eyes scanned the cabin wearily, then landed on Jonah. "They killed our husbands," Tala said bluntly. "Not in a war, not over land. Just because they were drunk and wanted to sell people." Jonah paused. He had heard stories like that, but hearing them and seeing them, they were not the same. "They hung us up and said they would come back for us in the morning." Another voice added quietly. Jonah understood, and the old memories rose again like wounds that had never fully healed. "I used to wear a uniform," he said, voice low. "I was taught that if you followed orders, everything would turn out fine." He stared into the fire. It did not. Tala was silent for a long time. Then she said, "We used to believe, too, that if we stayed quiet, if we endured, we would be left alone." There was no blame in her eyes, only exhaustion. "Now we have nothing left to lose," Tala continued, "except each other." Jonah looked around the cramped little cabin at the 5 people who had once hung upside down in a field of dry grass. "Here," he said slowly, "at least for tonight no one will touch any of you." Tala looked at him, and this time in her eyes there was no suspicion, only the faintest flicker of trust. The wind howled through the wooden cracks all night, as if trying to tear the tiny cabin off the side of the mountain. Jonah barely slept. He sat with his back against the wall, rifle resting across his thighs, eyes fixed on the dying fire. Every time the wood popped and cracked, the 5 women jolted awake, reacting like people who had grown used to being roused by violence. Tala was the only one who did not fall back asleep. She sat upright, even though every breath clearly sent pain rippling through her body. The fire light danced across her bruised face, highlighting her strong features. Not a soft kind of beauty, but the beauty of someone who had survived. "You do not need to stay up all night," she said softly. Jonah did not turn. Old habit from the war, yes. A long silence stretched between them. The wind outside howled like a ghost. "I used to think," Jonah said, "that once I left the army everything would stop. But some nights I still hear the screaming, not from the enemy, from the people I could not save." Tala watched him for a long time. "We carry those sounds too," she said. "Children crying, houses burning, ropes tightening." She looked down at her ankle where the rope marks were still deep and red. "Sometimes I wished I had died with them," Tala said. "But then I remembered if I died, the past would sleep easy." The fire collapsed inward, the light turning softer. Jonah stood and threw more wood into the stove. "This place is not much," he said, "but it holds. And I know the mountain paths around here. They will not find it easily. Tala rose too, her steps slow but steady. They stood a little closer than necessary, their body heat pushing back the chill that crept in through wood and stone. "What if they come back?" she asked. Jonah looked her straight in the eye. "Then they will not be hanging anyone ever again." A simple sentence, no promises, no vows, but Tala nodded. For the first time since she had hung in the dry grass fields, she allowed herself to believe that tonight they would survive. "Thank you so much for being here with me. Please let us know where you're following from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe to the channel to support me. I just wish you peace and happiness." Wherever you are listening to this story, morning arrived in a silence that felt wrong. Jonah was the first to notice, not because of the light, but because there were no birds. He stood by the narrow window, looking out over the grassland, still dusted with a thin layer of snow. The wind had shifted direction during the night, and then he saw them, horse tracks. Not many, but clear enough, leading from the edge of the woods straight toward the cabin. Jonah did not have to guess. Slave traders never left anything behind. They had come back just earlier than he expected. He turned back inside. The 5 women were already awake, standing close together out of instinct. Tala stepped forward, not asking, just meeting Jonah's eyes. "They are coming," he said simply. No one panicked. People who had once been hung upside down in a field no longer feared in the same way. Jonah opened a wooden chest, pulling out 2 old rifles and a revolver. He laid the weapons on the table. "I do not hand out guns to people who do not know how to use them," he said. "But I need you to know the escape path." He pointed to the back door where a narrow trail led down through a rocky crevice. "If things go bad, follow this. Do not look back." Tala did not move. "What about you?" she asked. Jonah loaded his rifle. The sharp clicks echoed in the room. "I stay." The sound of hoofbeats carried through the wind. 3 horses, then 4 drunken voices, laughter, and the reek of alcohol blew in with the cold. "We know you are hiding our goods in there," a raspy voice shouted. "Come out, old man." No need for blood. Jonah stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. The barrel was lowered, but still aimed. "There are no goods here," he said, "only a home." Laughter broke out. One of them stepped forward, gun in hand. "I see the drag marks. Do not try to be a hero." Jonah said nothing. The first shot rang out from the ridge, slicing through the air and slamming into the wooden beam beside his shoulder. Jonah fired back immediately. A warning shot straight into the ground near the hooves of the lead rider. The horse screamed and reared up. "Back off," Jonah said, voice low and steady. "The next one will not hit dirt." A heavy silence settled. The slavers pulled their horses back a few steps, cursing under their breath, eyes full of hate. "This is not over," one of them growled. Jonah did not move. The rifle still aimed even as they turned and rode away. He never lowered the barrel. Behind the door, Tala saw his back, saw the stance of a man who chose to stand. Not because he had to, but because he decided to. And she knew from this moment on, none of them were just refugees anymore. They came back before the sun reached the mountaintop. This time there was no mocking laughter from a distance. 6 horses lined up in front of the cabin. Their guns were visible, hanging out in the open. Jonah stood on the porch, unmoving. His coat was open, the rifle resting against his shoulder. The wind kicked up dry dust around his boots. The man in front spat into the dirt. "Old man," he said, his voice soaked in alcohol. "You think you can keep those 5 pieces of merchandise?" No one inside the cabin spoke, but Jonah knew they were there, standing close together, listening to every word. "Leave," Jonah said. "This is your last chance," one of them scoffed. "You used to be a soldier." "I heard that, but you have no army now, no badge, just a rotten cabin and a few Apache women." Jonah stepped forward. The porch groaned beneath his feet. "They are not merchandise," he said, "and they are not going anywhere." The leader's eyes darkened. "So what? You planning to die for them?" Jonah did not answer right away. He turned his head, looking back at the wooden door behind him. Then he faced them again, his voice dropped low, steady. Every word cutting clear through the tense mountain air. "They are my family. If you want to take them, you will have to walk over my dead body." Silence fell, heavy as snow. One of them raised his gun first. Jonah fired faster. Bang! The shot ripped through the air, slamming into the wooden crate beside the saddle. Splinters flew. The horse reared up violently. The slavers fired back. 2 shots, then 3 bullets punched into the cabin walls. Jonah rolled to the side and returned fire controlled, precise, no panic. Inside the cabin, Tala heard the gunfire and did not run. She opened the back door and led the others down the rocky crevice just as Jonah had shown them. Then she turned around. No weapon in hand, just eyes on the man who was shielding them with his own body. The gunfight lasted only minutes. When one of the riders was knocked off his horse by a shot grazing his shoulder, the others hesitated. They had not come to die. They had come to hunt the weak, and here there were no weak ones left. They retreated, cursing, swearing to come back with more men. Jonah stood in the middle of the porch, breathing hard. The smoke slowly drifted away. Behind him, the door creaked open. Tala stood there. She said nothing. She looked at Jonah like she was seeing something that could never be undone. From that moment on, he was not just protecting them. He had chosen them. Night fell slowly, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath after the gunfire. Jonah sat on the porch steps, wiping gun smoke from his hands with an old cloth. His shoulder rocked, not from any bullet, but from hours of tension. When he finally stood to head inside, Tala was already there. She stood near the fire, her tall shadow stretching long across the wooden wall. The bruises on her wrists were still visible, but her back was straight. Her eyes no longer held suspicion. "You did not have to do that," Tala said softly. "I did," Jonah replied. "I chose to." She stepped closer, not touching, just close enough for Jonah to feel the warmth of another person, a warmth he had lived without for far too long. "Do you know what this will bring?" Tala asked. "I do," Jonah said, "but I have spent my whole life doing what others told me to do. This time I decide." Tala stayed quiet for a long while. Then she reached out and touched the cut on Jonah's cheek. It was a clumsy gesture, like someone not used to touching others without fear. "No one has ever stood in front of us like that," she said. "Not soldiers, not white men." Jonah gave a faint smile. "I have never stood in front of anyone like that either." The space between them disappeared without either of them noticing when Tala leaned in first. A slow, heavy kiss, not rushed, not claiming, just two people trying to make sure they were still alive. Jonah's hand rested on Tala's back. Solid, warm, real. The fire in the stove burned low. The wind outside remained cold, but inside the cabin the cold no longer mattered. They said no more words. Just one night. One night they allowed themselves to stay, not running, not bracing for the sound of rope tightening or sudden gunfire. The next morning, Jonah woke early. Tala was still sleeping beside him, her breathing steady, her face for the first time at peace. Pale light slipped through the cracks in the door, falling across two people who had once been crushed by the past in different ways. Jonah sat up quietly. He knew that once the sun rose higher, the slavers might return. The law might come. The world out there was still as cruel as ever, but something had changed in the night. From now on, he would not be standing alone on that porch anymore. The ground had started to soften after the first thaw. Jonah noticed it one morning. When the shovel no longer bounced off the earth like it was stone, the cabin changed before any of them realized it. It was no longer just a place to hide. The roof had been carefully patched. The fence stood taller. The narrow trail down to the rocky crevice was now hidden beneath dry branches. Small things, but the kind of things people do when they mean to stay. Tala worked from morning to dusk. No one told her to, no one commanded her. She chopped wood, fixed the walls, carried water her broad shoulders, taking on the kind of work that would make even two grown men hesitate. The other women slowly divided the tasks among themselves without needing to speak much. They were used to surviving together through loss. The only difference now was no one was chasing them away. One afternoon, Jonah put on his coat and saddled his horse. "I am going to town," he said. "A few days," Tala looked at him. She did not ask when he would return, she just nodded. The town was the same, dirty, loud, and full of eyes that loved to poke into things that were not theirs. Jonah said little. He met with an old lawyer, signed papers, used what connections he still had from his army days, not to show power, but to give a name to what had begun to exist, a family not by blood, by choice. When Jonah returned, a light rain was falling. Tala stood under the porch uncovered as if she had known he would come back. Jonah handed her the papers. He did not explain much. He only said no one has the right to take them away anymore. Tala held the document for a long time. The words were not in her language, but the meaning she understood. "You did this," she said. "Not for me," Jonah shook his head, "for all of you." That night they sat around the table. No one spoke. only the sound of rain tapping the wooden roof and the warmth of a hot meal. One of the women said softly, "We could plant crops in the spring." Jonah looked around. 5 people who had once hung upside down in a dry field, now talking about growing food. The cabin was no longer a place to run to. It was becoming a place chosen. And Jonah knew when spring truly came, none of them would leave. They would stay because they wanted to. Spring did not come with noise. It arrived in the smell of damp earth after the rain. In the tender green shoots growing from the very spot where people had once been hung, Jonah noticed it as he led his horse across the old field. The wooden frame had been gone for a long time. All that remained was an open patch of ground and memories that no one spoke of anymore. They did not need to. The cabin was different now, not bigger but stronger. There were signs of human hands everywhere, voices, occasional laughter, awkward but real. Jonah and Tala never talked much about the night they shared. They did not have to. Some things once spoken become smaller than their truth. One afternoon, while Tala was mending the fence, Jonah walked up and stood beside her for a long time without saying a word. The breeze carried the scent of new grass. "I am not good at saying these things," Jonah finally said. "I know," Tala replied, not looking up. Jonah took a breath. "I cannot promise you an easy life. I can only promise I will stand beside you." Tala turned to him. Her eyes were not looking for vows. They were just checking if he meant what he said. "That is enough," she said. They did not need rings. They did not need a preacher. They did not need the town to know. The wedding took place beneath the old tree behind the cabin. 4 women stood as witnesses. No wedding dress, no ceremony full of fuss. Just 2 people standing side by side. Jonah took Tala's hand. Her hand was large, calloused, warm. From this day on, Jonah said slowly, "This is home." Tala nodded. She did not try to be someone else. She just stood there exactly as she was. Spring spread all around them. They planted crops, built a new pen. The other women stayed not out of debt or obligation, but because they chose to live in this place. The slavers never returned. Maybe it was the rumors. Maybe they realized there are places where predators no longer roam freely. Jonah still woke in the night sometimes. Tala still fell silent for long stretches. The past had not vanished, but it no longer controlled them. The cabin had once been a place of isolation. Now it was the place where those who had once hung upside down in a dry, forgotten field had planted their feet and chosen to stand together. Dear friends, in the harshest of lands, kindness is always the first thing to be tested. Not everyone has the courage to stop, open a door, and stand between evil and the innocent, even when doing so puts their own safety at risk. But it is people like that, the ones who choose to help. When no one tells them they have to, who keep this world from falling completely into darkness. Kindness does not shout. It does not ask for credit. It only needs one person brave enough to say, "I will not turn away." And as long as such people exist, hope still has a place in this world. Through this story, I only hope to recall a piece of the past, dusty, blood-stained, and real. A time when the strong believed they could write the law themselves. But today the world is different. We live under law, under justice, where everyone deserves protection. Because of that, we must value the present even more. Live with integrity, respect the law. Above all, I wish you health and happiness. I truly care about each and every one of you, the amazing audience of Best Wild West Stories. Let me know how this story made you feel. Leave a comment below. Hit the number 3 if you liked this story, and do not forget to subscribe to support the channel.